Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Coach. I am going to sit for 2 seconds just to see if you guys can see and hear me. Please let me know. I just got an alert on my phone that I went live. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. My name is Kristine Iandiorio. I am a coach with Hensel Coaching and Consulting. I am a professional coach, life coach, business coach. Um, Yeah. So I'm excited to be here. I see the numbers. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys just make a comment if you can hear me? And we're going to get started. I was just saying, I'm sorry I'm a couple minutes late. It is half days here for our middle schoolers, and my daughter is 13, and she called me at 10:45 to pick her up, which should have been fine. Thanks, Renee. And she called me and she was a little emotional about some things. So I had to do some, crisis aversion. And I had to then drive her into town. And so here I am, right? It's just, I think in my past that I used to get so worked up about things being a certain way. And since then, since doing a lot of this work, to be very honest with you, I've been able to relinquish control around what it looks like and the image that I want to uphold. And it just feels a lot better when you can surrender and just say to yourself and laugh. And, I literally got stuck behind a bus that let keep kids off. I got stuck behind a landscaping truck, all in efforts to get here at 11 a.m. And you can either come into this feeling really stressed and constricted, or it's just a matter of just saying to myself, it is what it is, and I will get there and it will happen. So here we are. So welcome to Coffee with Coach. Like I said, Coach Kristine Iandiorio. I coach with Tracy, and I'm excited to be here. This is a new series that we've been doing for the past couple of months, and it's been really great. And what makes this work really well is interaction. So I have a couple of topics that were submitted to me to talk about, and I would love to hear your thoughts on them. I think first we'll start with parenting, but before we do that, just want to preface this. I'll do this now, I'll do this at the end. Even with some of the topics that were submitted, one around parenting and how to get your kids to really kind of chip in and hold their weight at home without being a nag. And then the second around living with toxic family members, which then could just lead to a conversation on toxic relationships in general, is as I was thinking through the toxic relationship conversation, it is really helpful to have someone else to work through these things on, because a lot of it is our ego systems. It's the way we perceive things. And a lot of the work we can do on ourselves to help make external stuff better. So if you are interested in learning more about working with a coach, I will definitely put a link in the comments and you guys can set up a free call, because this is all about coaching. And so, with the first topic, the question that came up was, how do I get my 20-year-old, 21-year-old to help out around the house? And I'm curious if anyone has a similar situation where it's really hard to get your kids to help out around the house, regardless of what age they are. But I imagine in the current climate today that there are a lot of kids that are moving back home. And it probably is really hard for parents. I have a 13 and 11-year-old. So I have my own, you know, conversations about what it looks like to help out and not wanting to feel like a nag and not wanting to feel like it just all falls on me. Can you guys relate to that? Does anyone have anything to kind of add? But really, here, I think one of the biggest things that yes, my 9-year-old granddaughter. So tell me more, Tracy. Thank you so much for, contributing. Like, what is it? Like, is it that you're asking them to do things? Is it that, I certainly get an eye roll, or I get, I don't even think they hear me sometimes. They're on their devices, they're focusing on what they're focusing on. And I'll ask many, many times. And I had a situation recently where I said to my daughter, I said, I just asked you 5 times for something. And either you said not now or, whatever it was. And by the fifth time, like, I blow up. Right? Like, no one's hearing me. I'm feeling like I'm not doing this myself. I'm not doing this for you. We're not regressing. And all of a sudden, I'm going to start taking these responsibilities on. And so, I think with a lot of this, she starts but won't finish. Yeah, and it's like, how do you have this conversation? I also had this conversation with a client recently and setting ourselves up for summer, right? It's summer break. Many people are on break already here in New York. We are not on break yet. We are still like in school and wrapping that up. But, as of July 1st, for me, it's really a matter of saying to my kids, like, okay, let's sit down. Let's all agree on like, what are your jobs? What are your responsibilities, right, in this house? I don't want to have to ask you to do them. However, like, if you're not doing them, I'm going to check in. But I think it is a matter of, if you set the expectations up front, it is a lot easier for them to actually know what they're expected to do, to know what they're needed to do. On the whim, it's a little bit harder, I feel like. But if you say, like, and you might want to say, the person who submitted this question, how do I get my 21-year-old to help out? It's really having an honest heart to heart talk about, like, what are you expecting of them? And maybe you can pick a few things that they could be responsible for and get their buy-in and say to them, how can we help you? How can I help you and support you in executing this? But it's definitely more helpful to be upfront, to have a conversation, to show them what you want them to do and how to do it so that they can understand what it looks like to be successful. As opposed to, I think a lot of times we just like hope that they do it, right? We just hope, or we just nag a lot and we think like, oh, just because I said you should pick this up versus dropping it on the floor, that it's going to happen. And so I think just here, assigning jobs, getting their buy in, having that conversation about expectations, about what it means to live in your house, especially as the kids get older. What does it look like that you're living here? You don't live here for free, And so I think, I have 13-year-old, she is going to live here, but, I have some expectations. And, when we all pitch in, it does make everyone a little bit happier, because I think what happens to the person, kind of like the mom who submitted this question, is you get really angry and resentful and you feel like everyone's taking advantage of you. You feel like it all falls on your shoulders. And then you're walking around with very catabolic energy. You're walking around with that negativity all the time. And the moment they don't do something, you might snap, which is not what we want, right? It's like, what kind of environment do you want to create? Maybe having that mission statement for yourself, for your family might be helpful. I set expectations for them when they come over. You must leave my house like you found it. Yes. And so that also, so Tracy, like, that's a really great point, in that, if and I did this with my kids a couple times, when like they would have friends over and then all of a sudden the mom would come pick someone up and my house was in disarray. It's like, okay, they're coming in 15 minutes. Let's start straightening up now. And I know that that's really hard for some children to like jump in and want to do that, but setting the expectation that, like, and especially for your child, if it's like a play date, I think what's a nice thing too is, if your kid knows they have to clean that up by themselves when their friends leave, they might do a little bit more corralling of getting their friends to say, okay, we have 10 minutes left. Let's just straighten this up. Because in reality, they're not playing and cleaning, playing and cleaning. So it might just be helpful. And it's all about like anticipating and planning ahead. I think here, though, there are consequences, right? And I think this is where Tracy Hensel really hammers home, is this like, if you do not do this, you will not get that. And so, whatever the age is, whatever the agreement is, again, setting the expectations up front, having that conversation with your kids, is just really important. And if you have a 21-year-old, you might say to them, if you don't do these things, I'm not going to do this for you, or this is like, this might end at a certain date. I think that you have to have some sort of consequence, along with the conversation, the agreement, right? Like, we all need to have a communication and interaction, alignment, and then say, like, and if these things don't happen, this is going to happen. And then you got to stick to it, right? I think as a parent, that is one of the hardest things. One of the biggest struggles I see is actually like following through on what we say and being really straight up front to say, like, if you don't do this, this is going to be what's happening, and then following through with it, right? And it's like, and if you set those like boundaries or expectations up front, then it's a lot easier to follow through with it and say, I told you, right? And so, Marilyn, what works for us is scheduling and also get them to do them schedule themselves. Yes, it's very like empowering and you're really putting ownership on them. And basically, and just like again, like Tracy says, we're raising our children to be adults. And so I know that sometimes like a child might not think that their room needs to be clean because they don't care, and it's not important to them. But there are certain things that are important, right? And it's like you're raising them so that they can eventually raise themselves. You're raising them to set, you might say to them, like, well, what is important to you? Right. And you just try to understand. And there are some things where you might say to yourself, I'm closing the door on that room, right? Like I'm not going in there. Like if that is where your mess is going to be, that is fine. But the rest of our house isn't. And so you just kind of have to make that those set those expectations. And like anything in life, like right now, I'm in a busy phase of life. Like our house is a little bit messier. Our kids are a little bit more all over the place. So, maybe when they come home, they are maybe decompressing and maybe they're not cleaning or whatever it is. And like, I'm okay with that now. But that means July 1st, when it's time to now we have more freedom, we're not as stretched so thin, then we get back on track, right? And we set the expectation for the family. And I think for parents, it's really important to say, like, when you don't do this, I feel this, like I don't want to have to feel that way. And just sharing with them. So I love scheduling together because I think, again, that goes back to responsibility and accountability and put in times by it. Might always work exactly as planned. Yes, it might exactly. It might not always work exactly as planned. And that's okay. And that's where, it's also like saying to yourself, okay, if I can't get this down, which is what we do in general, but if I can't get to this now, when am I going to get to it? And just having that conversation, being open. I do think though, everything is about energy. So we're going to talk about toxic people in our lives, but everything's about energy. So if you're huffing and puffing, if you're, yelling, being more like snippy because you're not getting things done, you're feeling like some needs are not being met, your kid's going to give that right back to you, right? So it's also your approach. It's like your conversations, how you have the conversations. And I'm not saying being a doormat, but I think that there is a certain approach to how you have a conversation. Oh, Renee, I love that. It's important to give, yes, simple instructions. And you know what? Like, I think that's a really great example of either like showing people what to do, simple instructions of like, this is how I tackle this. I like to create systems for a lot of my things. And I'm sure a lot of you guys, being Tracy followers, like to do that too. But like, if I have a system of how I do it that makes it easier, I share it with my kids. Like, I don't, I'm not just going to give them a task and not tell them how to be successful. So simple instructions, right? We don't need to overly complicate. I love that. And no yelling, right? I think that, like I said, though, by the fifth time I asked, sometimes my voice is raised. I'm frustrated. But I did ask you 5 times before that in a very nice voice. So I think it's a matter of also, and in those instances, like I've turned around to my kids and I've said to them, I'm like, I don't want to yell, but when you don't respond or you don't actually execute, that's what happens because I get frustrated. And so the one thing that I really have taken away about parenting, and I just want to share this, and I appreciate all the comments in helping this conversation because I think it's all helpful, right? It's like the system that works is the system that you do. So whatever you figure out that works for you, exactly, Renee, you have consequences and they must know this, right? You've communicated that with them. So, finding the system that works for you is half the battle. And so, but one of the things that I've learned about parenting, and I think it's like it's pain now or pain later, or pay now or pay later, right? A lot of times, especially when it's like we give in, we don't hold to the consequences. We kind of like let things go that we said, okay, well, if you do this, then I'm taking away your games, and then we don't do that. Like we will continue having that conversation multiple times until we have the moment where we're like, that's it, it's done. And so pay now or pay later. Having like feeling like you're the mean mom now, feeling like you're the mean parent now, feeling like that was a tough consequence, but they knew about it and I actually have to hold tight on this. That's really important because if you don't, your kids know that they can get away with it again. They know that they're like, well, why not? My mom said I couldn't do this, but here I am doing it. So does it really matter? So, and it's really hard sometimes. It's hard sometimes to kind of be really firm and say, you disobeyed or you didn't follow through or whatever it is. So, what we agreed upon you not getting is actually, I'm going to go through with it. um that can hurt. Your kids are crying, you're sad, you're not giving, like, it can be really hard when it comes to really hard things. And as your kids get older, we see like there's things, like there's hard decisions, there's hard conversations. We want to keep our kids safe, right? And that's what I've said to my kids. I'm like, I do this because I want to keep you safe. I do this because you're a 13-year-old who is an adult and knows how to make a lot of these decisions. So I want to be that parent that's there to like listen and be there for you. I want you to be able to come to me. But when we say that there's a consequence, we have to hold to it. And it's hard in the moment, but it will only benefit you later on. And so that's just, I don't know if anyone like can think about that or it resonates, but you pay now or you pay later, because if you don't identify, if you don't nip it in the bud now, you're going to keep doing it. And it only gets harder as these kids get older. And so, the person who submitted this question, I'm not sure if you're here now. If you are, please let us know. But it's like, how do I get my 21-year-old to help out around the house? I think it really is having a very honest conversation about the expectations, about what you're looking for from them, getting some buy in on where they can contribute. What does it look like to be successful? And what happens if they decide to not do this stuff? Right. And being really clear about that. And it might take some planning and thought on your side with maybe your spouse or your partner beforehand so that you have alignment, so that you know what you're going in with. But once you have that, and you can stick to it. It's like a boundary. Like you want to stick with it. You want to follow through with it. And so that's kind of how I, think about a lot of that stuff. Um, Renee, with my kids, I say keeping eye contact. When they don't listen, I simply say 1, 2, check mark, next action. Next action of theirs determines their consequences. Yes. And I think so it sounds like, there's some firmness and they know you are going to follow through. They know not to mess with you, right? And this is something that I know with my kids. Like, there's a lot of times they'll ask me something and I'll say, do not ask me again. And they know, because if they ask me again, like I'm not changing my mind. Now, if I say that and then later on I do decide to say, okay, this is fine now, I've made that, but like it's not because I'm feeling forced and it's not because they're annoying me and I just don't want to deal with them. So I think that like setting that up, that like do not ask again or you will definitely not get it. It's like you have to you have to be firm sometimes because these kids will run all they will run all over you. So determining what, and I think a lot of times it's like we don't want to, why don't we want to be like that firm person in those certain situations? Why don't we want to hold to the consequences? Why don't we want to stick to it? It's because we don't want to be the bad guy, right? We don't want to be the bad guy. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, at what cost am I doing this? And really just understanding for yourself. Like, if you don't care, then it's fine. Like, but obviously it might bother you. If it bothers you and you're feeling resentful, you're feeling not heard, you're feeling not supported, you feel like you do it all on your own. It could be really, there is a cost to that. And then there's also a cost in that, like, you're not teaching your kids what you expect for them or what you would like for them. Boundaries help them feel safe. They know what to expect. Yes. No, understanding your expectations or the expectations of others is really helpful in just knowing what direction you're moving in. Am I on track? Am I doing it right? Like, am I, where I'm supposed to be? And when your kids are little, you're the one who gets to set those expectations. When they're 21 years old, it's different. But if they're living in your house, you can say, you're in my house. These are my rules. Right. So I hope that was helpful. If anyone has anything else, definitely let me know. But, setting expectations, saying that there are rules, that's okay. You can do that, right? So the next question that came in was around, and And if anyone has anything else they want to talk about, put it in the chat. We can be flexible. Um, but the next question was about how to deal with toxic sibling where you live in the house together. And it just kind of made me think about toxic relationships in general. Living with someone toxic is very difficult. If anyone can relate to a toxic relationship, definitely put it in the comments. I'd be curious at what you think, how you feel, what struggles you have with it. We all like it could be a boss, it could be a friend in our friend group, it could be a family member. And I think some of this is just understanding like what really is a toxic relationship or a toxic person and what is just someone where we're just like kind of not getting along with them, but they are making us feel a certain way. And so, really understanding like what that person is doing to you is super helpful. Understanding when you have that moment of feeling like you're not being heard, you're being disrespected, what is happening? And you might just have that wall up the moment you go into that conversation with, as soon as you're with that person, that wall might go up, right? And so it's really important to start to understand for yourself, what is it that I feel like is not, you know, what needs are not being met in this relationship, right? Understanding that is really helpful so that at least you can start to understand to yourself, like, okay, like, is this something that I want to get from them? Am I just holding them to this standard and like they're never going to change? So I need to change. Right. And so with toxic relationships, I think it's really important to like talk to someone because a lot of times like we live in our own box and it's like we see things, we see everything we see validates the thoughts in our head. So if you already think that someone's toxic, every action they take, you might be like, see, there they go again. They're disrespecting me. They're this, they're that. And that's because your perception is looking for more validation for what you're feeling inside. And so it's really important just to get really clear um, on what it is that's really happening. Working with a coach is a great place. Working with a coach, a therapist, a unbiased person who will tell you maybe what you don't want to hear or what you need to hear is very helpful because right now it's just like you in your own world, but really trying to get just that other side, right? Other perspective. So talking to someone is really helpful. I wrote a list here, so I'm just going to refer to it if that's okay. I think here in this situation, this person said they're living with that toxic person. I imagine that's not by choice. But what I will tell you is you always have another choice. There is not only one option. And if you're having that hard of a time with someone and it is like emotionally, physically draining, your relationships with other people are suffering, there's a constant power struggle, there's unnecessary disrespect. Like you can take your power back and look at what other options are there for your living situation. So, if it's with a friend, that is some place where you might say to yourself, I'm going to stop being around this person so much. They're toxic. They don't even want to hear what I have to say. They don't respect me. I just don't feel good when I'm with them. You have the power to say, I don't need to be in that circle or I don't need to spend all my time there, right? Like, guys, like, pay attention. I have a friend one day who said she came home from a dinner. She said there's someone at that dinner that just doesn't make her feel great. She's like, so I'm not going to like jump to the opportunity to go out with those people as often, maybe, as I did before. Now that I'm kind of taking this away and saying to myself, I just don't feel that great when I'm with that person. Um, Interestingly enough, I also had a client who had a boss who was very toxic to her. And it was very interesting because in our first meeting, it was like our like exploratory conversation. She was like very frantic, very chaotic, talking about I don't even know how to be in a room with these people, like, and she kind of had this like energy. And so then when we finally started working together, I was like, oh my gosh, I said to myself, like, this is going to be a lot about regulating her nervous system because she is on alert. Her wall is up every time she's with this management team. And what was so interesting was we had a couple sessions over a couple months, and none of that energy was there. But in our first session after the initial session, she said, I have a new boss now. And we kind of focused on other things. Nothing came up again. And when we finally finished the sessions at the end of the couple months of working together, I said to her, she mentioned something. I said, when you first came to me, there was such chaotic energy, like it was frantic. You were unsettled. And she said, yeah, she goes, my initial boss made me feel that way. And when I had that other boss come in between us, everything changed. And so what's so interesting is I did ask her, I said, well, have you ever felt that way with someone in your life before? And she said, she goes, yeah, my ex-husband made me feel like that. It made me feel unsafe. And so what's so interesting about that conversation is some people in your life right now might make you feel unsafe in some ways. They might make you feel triggered. It might be an association with someone else in your life. And to make those connections is really interesting. But for her, I don't know. I'm so glad that she had that new boss come in because I don't know where she might have had to leave, right? Like if you have that energy, it's like if you have a toxic boss, you can either think to yourself, okay, these are the things I can do to try to make things better for myself. But eventually you might have to make the choice to leave. But in addition to that, really understanding like, why do I think that they're so toxic? Right? Why do I feel like this environment is so toxic to me? What needs are not being met? Right? Asking yourself those questions, getting really curious. I think in work environments, it's very easy to kind of like all like gather and align and like gossip and like, feel like, us versus them. But really understanding like what is it that's happening that's making me feel so badly, so disrespected. Um, and so, the other things that you can do in dealing with toxic relationships is the acceptance of that person's not changing. So I need to change. And, if you already know they're toxic, and like in this situation, the woman said that, everything I say, is a struggle. Everything I say, she's disrespectful. Also think about how you're interacting. Like, are you going in it with a different energy? Are you going in taking it personally? Because you don't have to, right? You don't have to take that personally. You can just accept them for who they are, accept what, you don't have to like it, but just notice your own energy. Are you in there for a fight? Because you might decide that's not worth it to me. That's not worth my energy. So I'm not going there. And that's where boundaries come in, right? You can kindly say, I didn't ask your opinion about that. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Amazon. I got a compliment on my headband, which of course distracted me. But so, with toxic relationships, like that's where like really you do have to get clear about like, and especially if you're living with someone, you might have to say to them, thank you. I didn't really ask for your opinion, or, I'm not open to talking about this, and you just walk away, right? Like you have to establish your boundaries. You have to protect yourself. And I think what happens a lot, and I know this is like kind of a weird scenario, but the other day, like my daughter, she just like was in a mood. She's 13, right? And like I could either go at her, which just creates like fireworks. And she didn't do anything disrespectful to me, really. She just kind of like was in the mood. She eye rolled, which I think someone said earlier. She did her eye rolling. It was early. She had a final the next like later that day. She is like a lot going on. So I was like, whatever. And I just like didn't even engage. We both went on our merry way. If I engaged, there would have been yelling. We would have like butt heads. And so it's the same thing with like a toxic or any relationship. It's like, how do you want to show up? Do you want that energy? Is it worth it? Like, because I think sometimes in like, especially with like a family member or if you're living with someone, like, you don't need to have that conversation. You don't need to go there. And you get to make that choice. And you don't have to feel weak because you didn't go head to head with them. You can feel strength because you made a decision to protect your peace. And so that is like definitely a recommendation, something to think about. The other thing is, like, allow yourself to be angry. Like, if you're in a toxic situation, like, let yourself feel the feelings and, like, be okay with it. I think oftentimes we want everybody to get along, all these things, but, like, it's totally okay, and it makes sense if you're feeling angry or disappointed or let down. Feel those feelings. Limit time with them, set boundaries, show yourself love and compassion, right? If you're not getting kindness from this other person, you have to show yourself kindness. And you have to kind of say, I did everything I could. I'm doing my best to set the best intentions for myself. Like, make yourself good. And then finally, take control. You don't have to be at the mercy of other people's negativity. You get to choose. And so it's just being really aware of your environment. It's being really aware of the energy you're in. It's so funny. I have like situations where, it's not really toxic. It's just energy I don't want to be around. And so I'll say that to like someone who's like, "Oh, I wish you were like coming with us." I'm like, "I just don't want to be in that energy right now." And I get to make that choice. Um, I also, though, know myself, and I know that I like to avoid things that make me feel uncomfortable. I mean, I think we all do. So a lot of times I have to have like just that heart to heart with myself. I'm like, am I just avoiding? Like, am I feeling like I'm making this decision and it's not the right decision because of my fear? So really just getting comfortable with yourself, asking yourself questions. And I think with any person that you're kind of interacting with conflict, like, you have your guns out and they have their guns out. And a lot of times if you come at it like, you did this, or if you just come out in a way that just isn't really kind of creating like a cohesive environment, like, their guns are going to go up. And so in those situations, my advice is always like, be curious, ask questions. If you have to be interacting with someone who's toxic, just get curious, ask questions. Oh, why did you do that? Oh, what happened there? You don't have to be like, I saw you do this and like, point fingers, but get curious. Curiosity really helps to open up space. Um, and it's not like, you can still kind of say what you want to say and get the answers that you want to get without making an assumption, without getting them being defensive. And so just thinking about those things when you're dealing with toxic relationships, thinking about like, where's my ego at play? Right. Because I think a lot of times in relationships, like, our walls go up too, right? And so understanding like, oh, is this because, I want to be XYZ and my ego is like getting the best of me? Is it because I want to be right? Is it because I'm stubborn and I want to hold that grudge? Is it because I just don't want to? Like, like, think about like, what energy are you bringing to this conversation? Is any of this resonating? I'm curious. I love this. I don't want to be around a woman that uses profanity in front of children. Yeah. So, like, establishing that, like, staying away from that person, and if it's someone that's close to you, then you might want to say to them, like, hey, like, we're really trying to not use profanity around our kids. You do you, but I'm just going to let you know, like, we might just like not be around as much, and being honest, right? Like, sometimes it's just helpful to be honest about those things, especially if it's someone you care about. If it's someone that you don't care about, walk away, right? Walk away. It's just a decision you've made around who you want to surround yourself with. Um, I think just helpful. And if anyone has any more comments on toxic relationships and friendships and family members, you always have a choice. If someone is really affecting you that much, it's really important to understand what's happening. And, I'll be honest, I've had a lot of relationships where I had to look back at myself. Like, I had to really understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And when I really got clear on that, I realized it had nothing to do with the other person. And, maybe they are like, maybe, if someone is disrespectful and they're mean, like, and toxic and all these things, like, you can separate yourself, but it's also like, what is it about me that is really so so emotional about this, right? Guys, get clear about yourself because that person could be in a group with another person and they're not even phased by their behavior. What is it about you that is feeling so triggered by their behavior? And it's interesting. And like I said, I've done this work for a long time now, and just recently I was like, I was like, "Oh, it's not what I thought it was. It's about me. It's about my own insecurity. It's about whatever it was." And a lot of times too, and I think Tracy did a values exercise with some people in a class, but I do values exercises with my clients all the time. But it's like understanding like what's really important to you. Like if you treat people with respect and you don't get that back, that's a value for you. And it's something that you hold very high in how, you treat people, you treat others and they treat you. And, if you're like, you don't make me feel like I'm living in my value, like it's just important to know, like, why does that person get me so mad? Oh, well, they don't respect me and I respect others. Or, they're really not a good listener. And I really pride myself in listening to people. And so, it's just really important to understand like where do you come into play in these situations where you feel really triggered? Um, yes. So yeah, so I wrote, and it's like, and the last thing I just kind of want to end with, and then if anyone has any other questions or comments, please drop them in the comments. But I think one, don't taking things personally, right? A big thing that I have a client, I probably shared this before. She took on the mantra of other people's opinions of me are none of my business because she thought that her in laws thought XYZ about her. And when she started to say to herself, well, other people's opinions of me are none of my business, my opinion of me is my business. I need to like myself, everything changed. And it was so funny because it was about her in-laws. And one of the favorite things is she said, there was just one day I decided to like not ask, like it was almost like she was like fishing, right, for information of like, what do my in-laws say about me when you saw them, to her husband. And she's like, I didn't say a word, I didn't ask. I just said, oh, you had a nice time at lunch, and we moved on. And she's like, now, normally I would have tried to get in there. I would have tried to, and she's like, I was so much more at peace because I don't care. Right. And in her head, she probably thought they were saying all these things, but like none of that matters. None of it is true. So, really being able to like understand your thoughts, understand to like not take things so personally, understand where to set those boundaries and say to yourself, you know what, I'm not going there. I'm protecting my peace. And to say like other people's thoughts of me are not my opinion or not, not my worries. That might help with toxic people because sometimes your guns are up because you think that they think something of you. And so getting really curious, working with a coach is like just getting, because it's hard to do this work on your own. I'll be really honest. Like I've had coaches, I've had mentors, I have peers, and this is where I've been. And then the last thing that I just wanted to share is it's almost like a personal mission statement or a family mission statement of kind of like what is the environment we want to create for ourselves. And so you can do this at home, you do this at work, you do this with your teams. Um, just asking yourself, what kind of environment do I want to create? Do you want to create a peaceful and loving environment where we are open to hearing others' thoughts? Do you want to create an environment that of success and it's about understanding what each person, how we define that? Do you want to create an environment of open communication and listening? If you're able to define the kind of the environment that you want to create and you're able to kind of connect into that whenever you are interacting with people, it starts to change how you show up, right? And so it's just something to get curious about. If you're in an environment where there's someone toxic and you don't like that energy, you have the ability to say, well, what do I want to create with this person? It might just be separation, but it also might be like, I am calm and at peace. And what does that look like for you? That might mean when they speak, I don't engage. When they speak, I don't take it personally, unless it's like really, really, really important to say what you have to say. And a lot of times it's not in toxic relationships because what is your goal? Are you trying to change their mind? Are you trying to get them to kind of validate you in some way? So there's so much behind it. But I think really the inner work and the digging of who you are, why you get triggered is really kind of where the magic can happen too. Because you'll learn something about yourself. You'll see the patterns, you'll see other areas of your life where maybe this is showing up, right? And so get curious. So that I think is it for today. I think, another thing I wrote and I'll share is just like surrendering to what is. We cannot change other people. We can only change ourselves. We can only impact how we show up. And I think if you are giving something a whirl and you're trying and you're putting effort in and you're not getting what you are expecting to get in return, or it's not feeling like you're moving ahead in the way that you want to, you can cut things off. And if it's a family member, you can limit your time, like you have that power and you always have a choice. And so I am pretty much wrapped up. I don't know if anyone has any other questions. I really appreciate everyone like logging in. I'm just going to put in here in the comments. I'll put in the comments the link to set up a call if anyone's interested. And if you are here still and you want to just put in any topics that you want to talk about in the future, drop them in the comment. Like it's so fun to get topics so that I know kind of what you're looking for. I think it's really fun to be able to do that. So thank you for the interaction. I appreciate you all being here. And again, my name is Kristine Iandiorio, and I'll see you guys next month. Thank you. Bye.